Hey guys, Levi with Grendel Hunter. Today we're going to talk about the 22 ARC ballistics and barrel lengths. One of the most common questions we get asked is what barrel length should I go with? What am I gaining? What am I giving up? And how much extra velocity and energy can I expect out of a longer length? Those are great questions, so to help answer them we took 3 of our uppers with 18, 20, and 22 inch barrels and shot all 5 of the current factory loadings from Hornady through a chronograph to gather ballistic data. If you know a little bit about ballistics, you know that things like temperature, air pressure, and humidity have an effect on your numbers. So the numbers we have here aren't necessarily going to be identical to yours, but it should be close enough to be interesting. In this video, we're going to take a good look at one of those 5 factory loads and a quick peek at another. But if you want to see all the data for all the loads and barrel lengths, we'll link the blog section on grendelhunter.com so you can take a look at that. So before we dive into the numbers, here's a real quick look at what exactly the 22 ARC is. The 22 ARC was developed by Hornady, who announced it towards the end of 2023, and components started to become readily available in early 2024. So here, in early 2025, it would seem like a pretty new cartridge, but in a lot of ways it sort of isn't. That's because it's basically a 22 caliber version of the 6.5 Grendel, which has been around for a couple decades now. You can see here just how many of the dimensions are identical between the 2 chamber drawings, and how many of those that aren't differ only because one is a 224 and the other is a 264 caliber. Of course, there are other small differences, but for practical purposes we can think of it as a neck-down Grendel. In addition to the 22 ARC, the 6.5 Grendel has another cousin, the 6mm ARC. All 3 of these calibers have significant advantages over the 223 Remington in terms of trajectory and lethality, but since we're talking specifically about the 22 ARC, let's check out the performance of that versus the 223 at 300 yards. In this chart, we're using our numbers for the 75 grain ELDM 22 ARC and Hornady's advertised numbers for the 73 grain ELDM 223. Their numbers are for a 24 inch barrel and ours are from our 22, but I figure this is close enough to illustrate the point. The 22 ARC has a clear advantage in velocity, energy, and trajectory. Out at 300 yards, it has 42% more energy. That's 300 extra foot-pounds. For the purpose of a visual demonstration of what an extra 300 foot-pounds looks like, this is a 158 grain 38 special at point blank. Admittedly, this isn't exactly a high power caliber. It actually doesn't even quite have 300 foot-pounds of energy, to be honest with you. But I really wanted to shoot something and this sounded fun. Okay, so no real surprise that the 22 ARC with its higher ballistic coefficient bullets and more powder outshines the 223. Now let's spend some time looking in depth at ballistics of some loads and barrel lengths. Here we got some numbers for the 80 grain ELDX load from Hornady, out of the 18, 20, and 22 inch barrels. If you're one of our northern neighbors hunting big whitetails or one of our southern friends at war with wild hogs, this is probably the one you'd choose. In the bar graph you can see a comparison of muzzle velocities, but what I often find more interesting is what the bullet is doing downrange. The 18 inch barrel still has that 80 grain bullet moving at over 2,250 feet per second at this range. A 20 inch barrel gives us an additional 68 feet per second at 300 yards, which is a 3% increase in velocity. Faster still is out of the 22 inch barrel, with a 6% velocity increase at nearly 2,400 feet per second. Now let's look at how these differences in velocities affect our energy at 300 yards. You can see that the 80 grain ELDX has a 905 foot-pound at that distance out of the 18 inch barrel. As a reference point, this is a good 250 to 300 foot-pound more than a typical 357 mag revolver has at point blank. So how much do we gain by adding 2 inches of barrel? Over 50 foot-pounds or 6%. And by adding 4 inches and using a 22 inch barrel, that gets us 12% more energy than the 18 inch at over 1,000 foot-pounds. Before moving on to trajectory, this may be a good time to talk about what I'm going to call max effective range. This means different things to different people, and I don't think it's one size fits all. But I'm going to define max effective range as the furthest distance at which you, your rifle, and your bullet can do what you intend to a specific target. The most important thing to consider is shot placement. Can we hit what we're aiming at? Let's assume that we're well prepared and we can put a bullet where we want it. Now considerations are energy and bullet performance. Do we have the energy to ethically kill the target, and will the bullet penetrate and expand enough to transfer that energy to the vital areas of the target? This is where things aren't always black and white. but ultimately everyone can agree that what we need to kill a coyote is different than what we need to kill a mature whitetail buck. For the ELDX bullet, Hornady says it will still perform down to velocities of 1600 feet per second. Even if it doesn't perform at speeds quite that slow, our velocities out of all 3 barrels were well in excess of that out beyond 500 yards, so no worries there. Now, if we can hit our target and the bullet will do its job, then we just have to choose an appropriate energy number to determine our max effective range. Just for the sake of discussion, I'm going to say the target is a mature deer, and I want to hit it with 1,000 foot-pounds. I don't completely buy that you need that much energy to ethically kill a deer, but it's a popular number, so let's be conservative and roll with that. If you want a deer hunt with the 80 grain ELDX and 22 ARC, using easy round numbers, your max effective ranges for the 18, 20, and 22 inch barrels are about 225, 275, and 300 yards respectively. Now, just for the fun of it, let's change our load to the 62 grain ELD varmint and change our target to a coyote. Let's say we'd be happy to hit him with 700 foot-pounds. In the interest of another visual representation, and just because I wanted to shoot something again, we'll load up some 357s rather than 38s and deliver 671 foot-pounds into these rather unpleasant looking fellows. Okay, so if we're happy with 700 foot-pounds for coyotes, then with a Hornady 62 grain 22 ARC load out of a 22 inch barrel, our max effective range becomes 450 yards, with a bullet that is still moving at over 2,250 feet per second. This makes the 22 ARC pretty interesting for coyote hunters. Finally, let's take a quick look at the trajectories for the 22 ARC with that 80 grain ELDX we were talking about before. At 300 yards, with a 100 yard zero, the 18 inch barrel gives us a bullet drop of 13.3 inches. The 20 inch barrel has a drop of 12 inches. The 22 inch barrel gives us a drop of 11.2 inches, so the extra velocity out of the 22 inch barrel makes it fly about 2 inches or 16% flatter than out of an 18 inch barrel. To see the numbers we gathered for all 5 of the loads we tested, please check out our website at grendelhunter.com or follow the link below. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching.